Okay, we're live. Good morning, everybody. Chuck Holton here. We've got some breaking news about the events that took place in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Las Vegas, Nevada, on the 1st of January. Now, as I go through this, I'm going to be a little circumspect and careful in my language because, YouTube gets heartburn if you just say things as they are. And so I have to be careful, and that way we don't have to worry about this video getting taken down. But when I talk about shenanigans happening around the country, you know what I'm talking about. And so I would just first ask you to just take a second real quick and share this podcast. And go to your social media. You can go to that little arrow up at the top of the screen that looks like this and share it. That way, more people will see this broadcast and you can help us continue to grow the channel. On top of that, tell me where you're watching from. I'd be interested to know. I'd like to go back through these later on and just see all the different places that people are watching from. Okay. So there were several incidents on the 1st of January. And before we go too far in extrapolating causes and motivations and things like that, the first thing I want to say is that I was sort of expecting something to happen because it's the 1st of January. It's New Year's Eve. Lots of crowds. When crowds of people get together, uh, they become a target for bad people. And that doesn't mean that you should never be a part of a crowd, but I can tell you the older I get, the less I like big crowds of people for this very reason. My friend John Correa talks about the 5 rules of stupid. And if you want to be safe with your family, you should avoid the 5 rules of stupid. Now, large groups of people are not necessarily named in those. I'll tell you what the 5 rules of stupid are. And what he says is that you shouldn't go stupid places at stupid times and do stupid things with stupid people for stupid reasons. Now, that's not to impugn at all the revelers who were out partying on the 1st of January, but suffice it to say that one of these attacks did take place after 3 a.m. in the morning. And if you're downtown New Orleans after 3 a.m. in the morning, any time of the year, there's a higher likelihood that something bad will happen to you. That's just a fact. And it's, again, not saying that people shouldn't have been there, not saying that it's their fault at all, nothing. I'm just saying that it's a known fact that if you're anywhere outside your own bedroom at 3 o'clock in the morning, especially if there are crowds of people around, there's a higher likelihood that bad things could happen. So that would be what we would call a stupid place at a stupid time. If you're out with a bunch of people who are drinking, you're doing stupid things with stupid people. Again, not to, I'm not making blanket statements about anything. I'm just saying that you could certainly qualify under the 5 rules of stupid. Now, John Correa says you can get away with breaking one of those rules. You can go to, and again, this is just to make it easier for you to understand and remember by calling them the 5 rules of stupid. You could call them the 5 rules of risk if you wanted to. Okay, so again, it's not anything for you to get upset about. It's just something to keep in mind. If you want to keep your family safe, common sense dictates that you should not go to places with large crowds of people who are probably, at least some of them, inebriated, especially very late at night, especially places that might be subject to symbolic, either political or ideological attacks by people, because they're going to look for soft targets like that. And in this case, somebody's asking, are we talking about the attacks on the first? Yes, in New Orleans and Las Vegas. Yes, we are. And we're going to talk about what we know in terms of things that might be tying these incidents together, and how we should be careful about extrapolating too much out of that, but we may very well find that these are connected in some way. So here's what we know so far. Just shortly after 3 a.m. in New Orleans on the 1st of January, an American Muslim man, I'm not going to repeat his name because we don't want to give him any more fame and notoriety than that we can. We don't want to glorify these people in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not going to mention his name, but he was an American Muslim man from Houston, Texas, former military. He had been in the, as far as we understand, the 29th Infantry Division, Tropic Thunder, as an intelligence guy, I believe. And he was, I think, recently divorced. He rented a truck from a an app called Turo. Now, I've rented through this app before. Turo is like Airbnb for your car. If you have an extra car that's just sitting in your driveway and you'd like to monetize that and get some, make it pay for itself, you can list your car on Turo. Anybody can, and you can rent it out to anybody that wants to. And there have been times when I've rented from Turo just because nothing else was available. There are some specific reasons why these attackers might have chosen Turo to rent from. It's nothing necessarily, it doesn't make the app bad in any way or nefarious in any way. It's just that it might be a little less, uh, a little more difficult to pick these guys up if they're renting from Turo as opposed to renting from one of the big national chains. They might need a little less in the way of identification, because you can meet directly with the owner of the vehicle and make arrangements with them. But also you might be able to more easily choose the exact make and model of car that you're looking for through Turo, because in the case, for example, of the explosion of the truck that was a Tesla Cybertruck that took place in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, it might be difficult to find a Tesla Cybertruck for rent from Enterprise. You know what I mean? So if you're specifically looking for a Tesla Cybertruck, Turo might be the place to go and rent that. That's why. Okay. Now, what we know about this guy in New Orleans is that he rented the truck in Houston, Texas. He drove to New Orleans. He taped a flag representing the Islamic State dash to the bumper of the back bumper of the truck, and then drove around a police car, literally right in front of a police car that was sitting on the curb with the lights on, just sort of sitting there. He just drove up on the curb and just took off down this pedestrian only street at a very high rate of speed. There are videos that have come out just today on Twitter or X that show this man driving down this street, and he was probably doing 55 miles an hour down there, just very high rate of speed. So far, 15 people have lost their lives and dozens more have been injured. Fortunately, many people were able to get out of the way, at least looking at the videos of the incident. Many people just barely missed being struck. Now, more than 12 hours later, I'm sorry, well, no, it's probably about, let's see, 10, 11, 12, 1. So not quite. About 10 hours later in Las Vegas, Nevada, a Tesla Cybertruck drove up to the front door of the Trump Hotel and then about 20 seconds later detonated. Now, the truck itself did not detonate. This was something that we need to point out about the reporting that came out from mainstream news outlets and is still being talked about. You'll notice that mainstream news outlets will say a truck drove up and detonated. Or they'll say a Tesla Cybertruck caught fire and exploded. What they're doing is they're putting the onus on Tesla. They're putting the onus on the truck and saying that the truck detonated. As a matter of fact, I've seen people on X who have been sort of gloating, leftists on X that are sort of gloating that, oh, how ironic that a truck by the company owned by Elon Musk, caught fire and exploded because they're so poor quality. They're so terrible. These vehicles are so bad. And as it turns out, no, that's not the case. If anything, the truck actually mitigated the uh, disaster somewhat. So the only person killed in that event was the driver of the truck. There were 7 people that were wounded. You can see on the video of the truck going off that there's a large fireball, and then you'll see fireworks, just like you see on 4th of July, bang, 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 going off underneath the portico of Trump Hotel. The hotel itself did not catch fire. The truck was loaded. It turns out the back of the truck was loaded with large mortar fireworks, the kind that you see on 4th of July, cans of gasoline, and camping fuel or propane gas. All meant, obviously, to create an explosion. And I would venture to say the reason the guy chose the Tesla Cybertruck was perhaps twofold. Number one, to make a political statement, because, it's obviously a political statement when you take a Cybertruck by a company owned by Elon Musk and drive it up on the front porch of a company owned by Donald Trump and set it off. It's obvious you're making a political statement. I mean, there couldn't be more obvious than that. Now, they have released the name of the supposed driver of the truck who perished in the event. I'm not going to repeat the name of the excuse me. I'm not going to repeat the name of the driver. Again, we don't want to give these people any more notoriety than they already have. I'm trying to get a water here and get something to drink. Excuse me just a second. So it's obvious it's a political statement, but he may also have chosen the Cybertruck because it has a very large lithium battery in it, and he was hoping that it would create a much larger explosion. But as it turns out, from the photographs that we've seen after they put the fire out, the truck itself sustained very little damage. I mean, not what you would expect from such a large fireball. The tires did not go up in flames. The tires are still intact. The sides of the truck are still intact. As a matter of fact, the sides of the truck were so strong that they directed the blast straight up rather than out, and probably kept some people from either dying or more people from being injured. The windows on the front of the hotel, which were only probably 10 feet away from the truck, didn't even break. That's pretty spectacular. I mean, it's pretty amazing if you ask me. So Chuck, folks, please go to chuckholton.com and you can get more information there. I'm posting things as we get it. I have been on the phone with, so there's a training center for elite law enforcement officers in Little Rock, Arkansas that I've been to several times. And the guy who owns it is a friend of mine. He has close contacts with uh, many of the law enforcement who are involved in the investigations surrounding these two events. These guys apparently, now the most concerning thing to me about all of this is not the tragedy that took place in New Orleans in terms of the ramming attack, which, as it turns out, they say is the most deadly ramming attack in American history. That's bad enough, but what's even worse than that is that apparently there were multiple explosive devices, IEDs, left around New Orleans, not just at the Airbnb that the guy was renting, but other places as well, with remote detonators, and the detonator was in the truck. So this guy not only rented the truck and used it as a weapon, he was wearing body armor, he had a firearm, and he engaged police after the truck came to a halt, shot two police officers before he himself was taken out, and had apparently planned much more mayhem and shenanigans around New Orleans that fortunately were caught and dismantled in time. But the law enforcement believes that this was something that was not just planned, not just a lone wolf attack, but they believe that there were more people involved in this attack. On that note, this assailant in New Orleans belonged to a mosque in Houston. That mosque is called the, let's see, I have it written down here. It's called the Masjid Bilal Mosque in Houston. And reportedly, the mosque is now telling its congregation not to cooperate with the FBI. Don't give any interviews. Don't talk to the FBI. Don't talk to the police. Now, if I was president and had my way, that would be the one thing that this if this mosque is telling its people not to cooperate with an active investigation into a terror attack that came from one of its people, I would count that mosque to be complicit in the attack. And that mosque would get shut down in a New York minute. Now, I'm trying to find out what kind of explosives were in these improvised devices that were around New Orleans. I have not been informed yet what kind of explosive. That's going to tell us a whole lot more about what the possibilities are of future follow-on attacks if this is indeed something that was planned and coordinated by a group of people and not just one person. If the explosives in those IEDs turn out to be homemade, then that's not near as concerning. I mean, look, one of the reasons why we have not seen a rash of vehicular IEDs and other forms of IEDs in the United States is because it's very difficult to get military grade explosives in the United States. You can't just go find yourself on the black market somewhere a grenade or a stick of C4 or even dynamite. Those are very, very highly controlled items. And about the only place in the United States where they can get items like that are at mines, in West Virginia, the open pit mines there, the mountaintop removal mines. They use explosives on a daily basis. We hear them from the lodge at 4 o'clock every day, right when they change shifts. You hear kaboom off in the distance. So they have actual explosives available to them, but they are very, very tightly controlled, very difficult to get a hold of. Explosives can be detected at ports of entry by sniffers, whether dogs or electronic sniffers. So it's very difficult to get that stuff in the United States, as well it should be. That's a that's a good thing. So if these IEDs that they're found around New Orleans happened to be from, they happen to be military grade explosives, Semtex or C4 or something like that, that would be a huge red flag. Very, very bad thing. They would need to track down where those are, where those came from. What we saw in the attack in Las Vegas is that the guy driving the truck who perished in the attack, they're saying he was a Green Beret U.S. Army Special Forces soldier. I saw one report that said he was an engineer, which would have meant he got specific training in explosives, more so than other soldiers do. I saw another report that said he was like a communications guy, which means he would not have gotten the additional highly specialized training in explosives that an engineer would have gotten in the special forces. Just the way that works out. Special forces is made up of a a special forces team has 12 guys, and there are about 6 different specialties that they sort of specialize in. So you have 18 Delta as a medic, you have a Tango, you have Charlie, you have Alpha, Bravo. Each one of those represents a different job. So you have a guy who's an engineer, you have a guy who's a weapon specialist, you have a guy who's a commo specialist, you have, like I said, the medic, et cetera, et cetera. And each of them gets specialized training in their specific job. And they do cross train somewhat, but I can tell you that an engineer, a special forces engineer, is going to get much more specialized training in explosives than a communication specialist will. So, not positive which one this guy was, but what we see from the attack is that he did not use any military grade explosives in his attack that we know of. If he did, it would have been a much more spectacular attack. It would have probably blown the front off of that building. You recall back in the 90s when Timothy McVeigh uh, detonated a box truck full of uh, fertilizer bombs. That's where they just take fertilizer, a certain kind of fertilizer. I don't want to get too specific, and they soak it down with an accelerant, and then detonate it, and it creates an actual explosive effect. Blew the front off the federal building in Oklahoma City. Well, that would be what the Trump Tower would look like today if he had used military grade explosives in there. But he did not. And so that speaks to the difficulty of obtaining explosives like that in the United States, or or the possibility that this guy was just acting on his own and not part of a bigger organization. Now, they're trying to draw some lines that connect these two events between the fact that both of them used the same rental app to rent their vehicle. I mean, think about it. If they both rented their car from Enterprise Rent-A-Car, let's say, would you consider that to be like an aha moment? Like, oh, these two guys were in cahoots. They were working together because they both used Alamo Rent-A-Car to rent their car. No, you wouldn't. So the fact that they both used Turo, which is a fairly well-known like I said, it's like Airbnb for your car. And all that tells me is that this guy specifically wanted to rent a Tesla Cybertruck, likely for the political statement that it would make to blow one of those up or light one of those off in front of the Trump hotel. It doesn't, to me, immediately say, aha, these two guys were working together, even though they say, wait a minute, here's another connection between them, that they both were stationed at what was then called Fort Bragg. They've since changed the name, which don't get me started on the ridiculousness of that. But they both were at Fort Bragg. Yeah, well, there's 57,000 troops at Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is like a good sized city. So that's like saying both of them went to high school in Cleveland. Okay. Now I'm not conclusively saying that there is no connection here. I'm saying that these are pretty thin connections that we've seen so far. But we do have two connections now. They both rented trucks from Turo, and they both served in the military at Fort Bragg. They were not in the same unit, though, and it's not likely that these guys would have known each other when they served at Fort Bragg. Because, like I say, Fort Bragg is 57,000 people. So, it's like I went to college in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and somebody says, "Oh, I have an uncle in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Do you know him?" I mean, what kind of a question is that? No, I don't know him. Why would I know your uncle just because we both have been to the same city? They were not both in Army intelligence, from what I'm seeing. Ski Bro says they were both in Army intelligence. No, that's not that's not the information I'm seeing. I'm seeing that the New Orleans assailant was in the 25th ID, which is, I believe, actually headquartered in uh, Hawaii. But anyway, he may have served at Fort Bragg. But he was not, from what I have seen, connected to the special forces at all. And the guy that was connected to the special forces, the assailant from Las Vegas, was a, they say, a Green Beret. Those two groups don't mix a lot. Standard infantry guys over here don't hang out with special forces guys over here a lot, even if they are on the same base. So it's not that tight of a connection. Now, I'm not saying that there's no possibility that they didn't run into each other at the local mosque or PX or something, or that they didn't, you know, play golf together on weekends or something like that. But the fact that they both lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina is not an in by itself an aha moment. So I'm just trying to give you my understanding of this based on my own military experience. If you're an Army guy, you're going to look at that and you're going to go, yeah, those guys probably didn't know each other. It doesn't matter that they were both stationed at the same base, even if they were there at the same time. The fact that they were, those two different units are fairly insular. You don't go out and just mix. Like when I was in the U.S. Army Rangers at Fort Benning, I didn't go hang out with the guys in the 197th Infantry down the road. I didn't hang out with the guys at the engineer unit literally right across the street from us. I didn't know a single one of those guys. Heck, I didn't hang out with guys in Bravo Company because I was in Alpha Company of the 3rd and 75th. It's an incredibly insular environment. We had our own gymnasium that we worked out in. Nobody else. It's not like all the soldiers went to the same gym. We had our own PT field. We had our own uh, dining halls. Okay. So I mean, again, just telling you from my own experience at being in the US military, the fact that they were both soldiers doesn't necessarily mean much. Now, they may have gotten together after their time in the military. I think it's every bit as likely that if they got together, if these two guys were connected in any way, then it's every bit as likely that they got together after their time in the military than they did in their time in the military. Now, we don't, what we know about the assailant from Las Vegas, he was from Colorado. The other guy was from Houston. The other guy was a Muslim. There's no indication that this guy in Las Vegas was a Muslim. They, there's just not a lot to connect those two guys, but you can bet that the FBI is looking into that. And I just want to caution you because it's really, this is what I was talking about this on the live that I did over on my channel, the Hot Zone, last night. The difference between being a conspiracy theorist and being a reasonable uh, seeker of the truth is that a reasonable seeker of the truth will look at this event in the context of what's happened in the past. So we can look back and we can look at other ramming attacks. We can look at other mass, active violence attacks in the United States and elsewhere. We can look at what the history is of these people and see what other people with similar history have done. And so we can make some inferences based on what we see from the past. That's what a reasonable truth seeker will do. What a conspiracy theorist will do is he'll take this event and he will try to extrapolate into the future instead of the past and try to look and say, aha, both of these guys had blue blazers, you know, both of them wore Timberland hiking boots. Aha. And they'll try to draw lines into the future without taking the context of the past into account. This is what sets apart a conspiracy theorist from a reasonable seeker of the truth. So let's try not to engage in conspiracy theory here, and let's talk more about what we do know. Well, we do know that both of these events, I would classify, if I had to say from what we know right now, I would say that the attack in New Orleans was ideologically motivated by a very unhappy guy who had some serious relationship problems. And he chose January 1st, New Year's Eve celebrations as his venue for his attack simply because it was a soft target. And there's almost nothing surprising about that because uh, we have known for years. I mean, all the way back long before 2001, that there are organizations, there are groups that are ideologically motivated out there who are recruiting heavily online, trying to indoctrinate and radicalize people to conduct attacks specifically like this. They're putting out training manuals. They're putting out how-to instructions, encouraging people literally to do this. I reported on this in Dresden, Germany, a while back, where the Islamic State has a magazine that they put out, a digital magazine, and in this magazine, they encourage people to do attacks like this, and so they say, get yourself a firearm. If you can't get a firearm, get a knife. If you can't get a knife, get a car. But weaponize something and use it to go after the infidel. They've been encouraging people to do this for a long time. So we've been pointing this out. As a matter of fact, I warned about this specific kind of attack in the months leading up to the election. I even wrote a book about it. It's called Death of Civilization. And it talks more about what I believe happened in Las Vegas, but it certainly includes uh, what happened. Look, there are a lot of ideologically motivated people in America right now, millions of people who are very, very upset about what's happening in Israel. I mean, just hours after this horrific assault on decency in New Orleans, where 15 people lost their lives innocent. Just hours after that, in New York City, yesterday, there was a large protest with hundreds and hundreds of people protesting the war in Gaza, flying the same ISIS flag that this attacker flew in New Orleans. Now, I'm sorry, but hold on. There's dogs breaking down the window over here. My son's dogs are trying to get in the room. They're trying to climb through the window. Here they come. Here they come. Okay. All right. Yeah, good boy. All right. Yeah, good girl. All right. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Get down. Okay. Come on. Let's go outside. Come on. Come on. Okay. My son has two absolutely crazy dogs, and they're insane. So I've been saying for a long time, these attacks are going to continue to happen, and they are likely going to ramp up over the next 4 years. I'm sorry, if you're flying an ISIS flag in the United States, there should be some repercussions for that. If personally, if I owned a company and I saw somebody that worked for me waving an ISIS flag at a protest, that guy would not have a job tomorrow. I don't know if we can make that illegal or not, because it is we do have free speech in this country. But I tell you what, if you see a guy go driving by flying an ISIS flag from his truck after what happened in New Orleans, Louisiana, you better call the police at the very least. And I would say that would be probable cause for a high threat felony traffic stop. Don't you agree? If you agree with me, go hit the like button. There's only 842 likes right now. Do me a favor. It really helps CBN to grow our channel if you will go and hit the like button. And that tells YouTube more people need to see this content. Now, I'm interested to know, while we're at it, how many of you have heard of my book or have gotten my book, Death of Civilization? Uh, so do me a favor and just post whether or not you have seen the book or gotten the book, Death of Civilization. It's available on Amazon. The best place to get it is go to chuckholton.com. If you're a supporter there, you can download a PDF of it for free. There's also a very comprehensive podcast that was done about it that goes through every facet of it. And the idea behind my book is not just to scare you that, oh my goodness, there's so much chaos and mayhem that's going to happen in the United States. Oh, what are we going to do? And it's not just your sort of typical pablum about, well, you better get a firearm and you better be prepared and you better have 6 months of food in your basement. None of those things are bad things. But what the book talks about is specific ways that you can make your family safer by making your community more resilient, ways that you can, because look, no man is an island. You can't expect to just get yourself a revolver and then you're going to be okay. We need to address these problems at their root. And I talked about this on my live yesterday, but you have a much bigger chance if you are going to be a victim of some sort of active violence. There's a much greater chance that that assailant in that event will be what we call an incel. That is an involuntary celibate, a very unhappy young man who spends most of his time playing violent video games and watching pornography. There are literally millions of young men across the United States who fit that bill. They live in their mama's basement. Nobody ever pays any attention to them. They don't get touched. They don't get hugged. They don't go to church. They come home from school and there's nobody there to take care of them. And they just go down and they sit there and play video games and watch pornography. And those people represent a bigger threat to you and me in America than Muslim extremists do. Hands down. Hands down. And so Death of Civilization talks about how we can start to rebuild the building blocks of community, the parallel structures to government. We can't expect the government to protect us from these people. We need to recreate or remake our culture in a more godly way by reaching out to the people around us and by creating community. And in so doing, we will make ourselves and our families safer. That's what Death of Civilization is all about. So if you want to get a free copy of it, you can go become a supporter over at chuckholton.com and you can download not just that book, but several of the other books and documentaries that I've come out with. But suffice it to say that in the book that I just released like 2 months ago, I was literally saying that in the coming 4 years, we are going to see an increasing number of chaotic attacks across America based on either ideological violence or political violence. And that's exactly what we saw on the 1st of January. I hate to be right on things like that. But you have to understand that about half of the people in America are today quite unhappy about our pick for president, about who our new president will be. And most of those people are just good Americans who just disagree politically and they just didn't vote for Donald Trump. That's okay. But some of those people aren't just upset. They're not just frustrated. They're not just disappointed. They are livid. And if there's anything that I learned from the first Trump administration, as I spent 4 years traveling around America, going to every uh, uh, protest and riot across the country for 4 years, it's that these hard leftists will intentionally create chaos across the United States over the next 4 years, specifically to make it so uncomfortable that you'll never want to vote for a Republican again. Because I just don't want to have to deal with this stuff. And if you don't believe that that had something to do with the 2020 election of Joe Biden, I would beg to disagree. I really think that all the Black Lives Matter stuff, all the, Antifa stuff, all of that was specifically calibrated to make it so uncomfortable under the first Trump administration that people were like, I just can't take any more of this. And I'm going to vote for somebody that's a little, calmer. I'm going to vote for calmer waters. And it's my personal opinion, not CBN's opinion. It's my personal opinion that over the next 4 years, the hard leftists are going to do it again at scale. They're already planning to do so. I'm planning to be in Washington, D.C. on the 20th of January. I'm not going to any of the galas. I'm not going into the inauguration. I'm just going to be on the outskirts where all the protesters are, covering the protests that take place. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's calm and quiet and there's a peaceful transfer of power. And I think at the higher levels of government, it will be. But what the left does is they stir up resentment and take advantage of people's inherent frustration, anger, and they whip that into a fervor that causes them to do things like we've seen. Now, somebody said, I just noticed a comment here um, that I wanted to address, and it's Posami says, no, I'm sorry, that's not it. No, let's see, where did I see that? Taylor Keller says, totally wrong about those poor neglected kids. What a disgusting comment. Um, Look, I'm not saying that we should condemn these children. As a matter of fact, if you read my book, I say just the opposite. These young men who are considered involuntary celibates, that's not a term that you know put on somebody. That's a term they give themselves. Involuntary celibates in the United States are a thing. Just go Google it. There are chat rooms that and websites that they go to, and they stew in their own juices, and they encourage each other to the point of violence sometimes. And the FBI says there have been more than 40 mass shootings across the United States and other active violence measures around the world that have been attributed to involuntary celibates. If you look at the guy that tried to assassinate Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, that guy was he was an incel. He may not have identified as one, but he fit the mold. Okay? If you look at many of the violent attacks that happen across the United States, the kids that do these attacks qualify as involuntary celibates. They can't get a girlfriend, or they have problems with girls, or they're just latchkey kids home alone. Am I saying that we should condemn latchkey kids? No, absolutely not. We should love on these kids. We should hug them every chance we get. You could literally save people's lives by just hugging more people. We should invite them to church, help them get involved in something that's meaningful in their lives and get away from these terrible uh, scourge of our society with the violent video games and pornography. I've since I mentioned it yesterday on my live, I've been inundated by people in my inbox emailing me and saying that describes my son or my nephew or whatever, that they're they're just like that, and I'm really concerned about them. And I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, if you live in their house and you control the internet in your house, take action to turn off the pornography. You can get something called Covenant Eyes. And yeah, it's going to cost you a monthly fee to pay for this. But look, it is 100% worth it to do what you have to do. You hire somebody to come in and put some limits on your internet through your router so that your kids cannot access pornography when you're not home. I would say even, perform a plastectomy and get rid of those plastic gaming devices altogether. They're so realistic. They're hyper realistic. I mean, you look at, I was at a barber shop the other day getting my haircut, and they had a game console in there, and these guys were sitting there playing this Grand Theft Auto, and it's literally practicing running around town committing felonies. Is that what you want to train your kids to do? You say, oh, well, they'll be really angry if I got, look, It's not your job to be your kid's friend. It's your job to create a safe environment for your kid. And if your kid is playing those violent video games, or any video games, I would say, maybe it would be better to just shut those things off and get rid of them and make it so boring in your house that your kids have to actually go outside and do something constructive. You know, these video games are so hyper realistic, man. The sky is bluer and the grass is greener and the trees are all real. We had something like that when I was a kid. It was called playing outside. You know, the average kid these days doesn't stray more than 300 feet from his house. That's because most of them are planted on their couch. Listen to me, parents. Your children are not poodles. They're not pets. You're supposed to be making men out of them. You're not going to make men out of your boys by letting them turn into pasty-faced little Cheeto heads sitting on their couch playing violent video games. Kick them out of your house and tell them, don't come home until it gets dark. I don't want to see you. Go get into some trouble out there. It'd be far more sad. This is why I saw this. I'm on my soapbox now, but I saw this news item about this poor woman in Georgia who was, she was out shopping and she left her son at home with an adult. A grandfather was there, and her 12-year-old son decided to go for a walk, and he walked down to the corner store and talked to some friends, and some Karen saw him walking down the road and called the police, and the police came and arrested the mother for letting her 12-year-old leave the house unsupervised. 12 years old. Heck, when I was 8 years old, I was all over town. I rode my bike 10 miles to my friend's house. I rode my bike to church every Sunday since I was probably 6 or 7. And it was 8 miles away from our home, all the way across town. And you say, oh, my goodness, I don't want my children to get picked up by some pervert or wacko or everything. Listen, it's safer for your children today than it was when we were kids, objectively. The crime rate, the rate of children being picked up on the street is lower now than it was when we were kids. Objectively safer, but you don't think it is because we have so much more news available to us. You hear a lot more about these things. They get a lot more press than they did when we were kids. Anthony Emore says, not video games' fault. Well, it certainly doesn't help. I'm sorry. These people that say, oh, video games, they're not that bad. It's just a good thing for the kids. Keeps them busy. Gives them something to think about, something to do. Absolutely not. Again, this is just my opinion. Obviously, you're welcome to your opinion. My children, we didn't give them video games. It got so boring in my house, my kids had to go outside and play or read a book. And I really believe that we could dramatically lower the number of active violent, the amount of violence, period, in our society if we just got rid of those things. Because forget about the negative content that they're being exposed to. The fact that the whole point of these games is to literally go around and commit crimes. Forget about that. The simple fact that when our kids are sitting there playing video games, they are separated from the rest of society. It's social media, whether it's our daughters on Instagram or TikTok or anything like that. They are not learning to interact with other human beings. Even if they're playing the game with other people that are, through the game, you're interacting with a device that is interacting with other people. And you see this in young men. Listen, when my book, Prowess, came out, I wrote a book for young men called Prowess, The Man You Were Meant to Be. And I wrote it because when I would go around the country and speak on the topic of manhood, I'd get young men in their teens and 20s lining up after the speech that wanted to talk to me. And what they wanted to talk about was the fact that I have no idea how to get a girlfriend. I'm 20 years old. I've never had a girlfriend. I don't know how. Help me. Or I've got this girl I kind of like, but I don't know if she's the right one for me. I don't know if she's the one God has for me. And I would say, you're asking the wrong question. You don't find the right one, guys. You become the right one. You become the man that God intended for you to be, and the women will flock to you. And you can pick anyone you want, and you devote yourself to her and her only, and she'll be happy and you'll be happy for the rest of your life. But if all of your interaction with the world around you comes through this little device, pew, 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 right? You're not learning the nuanced art of wooing a woman. You're not learning how to interact with people in the real world. That's why you see so much garbage on YouTube. You know, that in the comments, we got to have these moderators. My moderators just work so hard, and I'm so appreciative for that. They work so hard because there's so much just filth that gets posted. You don't even see most of it because they get rid of it right away. But if you go back and you look at the stuff that gets deleted, there's so much filth. Like, you would never, ever speak to somebody that way in real life because you'd probably lose your teeth. But people feel like they can talk that way online because it's completely anonymous. This is contributing to the death of civilization as we know it. That's why I wrote a book about it. So again, if you want to get a copy of that book, you can download a copy of Death of Civilization from my website, chuckholton.com, if you're a supporter over there, or you can get it on Amazon. Just came out a few weeks ago. It's already been one of my best-selling books ever. I've got 11 books in print, and it's been one of my most popular already. And it speaks directly to this topic that we're on. Folks, it's my belief that the next 4 years are going to see a continued increase of mayhem and chaos across the country as certain factions within the country intentionally try to make it worse. They foment this kind of mayhem and shenanigans around the country. And so, if you want to know what you can do about it to make your family safer, you can get that book. And, you know, I look, if you cannot afford the cost of the book, I want you to have it. If you can't afford it, just send me an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com, and I will send you a copy of the book for free. Because I don't want to I don't want to use these terrible events to profit off of this. I just want you to have the information. So I mean, we've got so many people who've been so generous, and so I'm not concerned about the money. If you want a copy of the book and you cannot afford it, just send me an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com, and I will forward you a link where you can download a PDF copy. I'm not going to send you a physical copy. That would bankrupt me. But I will send you a downloadable PDF that you can read if you just send me an email if you can't afford it. And if you can afford it and you want to donate some to other people, you can contact me as well and we can work that out. But I would recommend, folks, that you before you do any of that, if you're going to support anybody, support CBN News. Look, I'm not an employee of CBN. I am a contractor, a freelancer who has been working with CBN on and off as an employee and not for more than 20 years. The reason that I am an employee of CBN, or that I work with CBN, is because they are, I believe, the most legitimate, unbiased news source that you can find in America today. There's not a political, uh, axe to grind here. We are trying to create content that is of interest to Christians and broadcast that out around the world. We have millions of people following us, and we are 100% supported by our viewers. And so if you want to keep us out in the field, keep us doing what we do, go to cbnnews.com and become a supporter over there. Okay? All right. Well, that's all we got for today, folks. I would want to say a prayer. We always want to end with prayer here. And I want to pray for our country as we get started into 2025. So would you bow your heads and pray with me? It's 4,000 people praying together. That's a pretty powerful thing. All right. Lord God, we just come to you right now. All of us agree, Lord, that we just beg you to bring your peace to America. I pray that you would thwart the plans of evil people. I pray that you would help us this year to increase our own personal holiness. Lord, that we would not be given to a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. That we would be able to see clearly what you're doing around us and join you in that and make a difference for people in America and around the world this year. Lord, I pray that we would be so busy getting outside ourselves, helping other people who are in need, that we wouldn't even have time to focus on our own problems and issues. I pray these things, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Bless all of you. Thank you very much for following CBN News. You can follow me directly on the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube, or just go to chuckholton.com. I appreciate every one of you. If you have questions or comments, then send them to me. You can send them to me at hotzoneholton@gmail.com. We will be on again soon. Again, please hit that like button on your way out and subscribe to CBN News. That helps us stay on the air.